Welcome to DM Tales. Before we dive into the story, please subscribe. The studio lights were still warm on Emma's skin when the floor shifted beneath her. She had just finished the final segment of the day, smiling, composed, professional to the last second. The red recording light went dark. Applause rippled politely from the crew. Someone gave her a thumbs up. Another mouthed "great job" as they unplugged a microphone. Emma exhaled, the way she always did after a broadcast, already thinking about the glass of water waiting backstage and the schedule for tomorrow. Tomorrow mattered. It always had. She slipped off her heels in her dressing room and sat for a moment, rolling her shoulders, letting the performance drain from her body. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror. Flawless makeup, sharp eyes, confidence carefully painted on. This was the version of herself the world knew. The version she had built, brick by brick, over years of early mornings, late nights, sacrifices she never spoke about. Her phone buzzed. She smiled reflexively before even looking at it. Then she saw the sender. Network executive. Her smile faltered. The message was brief. "Can you come to the conference room? Now." No emojis. No warmth. No explanation. Emma stood slowly. A faint pressure settled in her chest, the kind she usually ignored. She'd learned how. In her world, pressure was constant. Pressure meant importance. Pressure meant success. Still, as she walked down the corridor, the studio suddenly felt unfamiliar. Longer, quieter. Conversations hushed as she passed. Eyes avoided hers. Someone dropped a clipboard. The conference room door was already open. 3 people sat inside. None of them met her eyes at first. She knew then. The words came out in pieces. Carefully phrased. Corporate. Gentle in tone, brutal in meaning. Strategic restructuring. Shifting audience priorities. A difficult decision. Her show was canceled. Effective immediately. Emma nodded as if she understood, as if this were just another meeting, another adjustment. She heard herself say things like "I see," and "thank you for letting me know." Her voice sounded steady, almost calm. Inside, something cracked. She left the building in a daze. The evening air felt colder than it should have. The city lights blurred as she walked to her car, keys trembling in her hand. Canceled. The word echoed like a dropped glass shattering over and over again. She sat behind the wheel, but didn't start the engine. Her hands rested uselessly in her lap. For years, her life had moved in tight, precise rhythms. Wake, work, perform, repeat. Now there was a sudden, terrifying silence where the next step should be. Who was she without the show? By the time Emma reached her apartment, the shock had settled into something heavier. Fear. The door clicked shut behind her, and the sound echoed too loudly in the empty space. She stood there for a moment, heels still on, purse hanging from her shoulder, staring at nothing. Her apartment was immaculate. Neutral tones, clean lines, everything intentional, everything controlled, everything suddenly meaningless. She dropped her bag onto the kitchen counter and sank onto the couch. The cushions didn't shift much, they rarely did. No warmth lingered there. No sign of life except her own breathing. Her phone lay face up beside her. She waited for it to buzz. It didn't. Surely someone would call. Her agent. A producer. A friend. Someone would say this is temporary, or we'll fix it, or you're too good to disappear. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Emma scrolled through old messages instead. Congratulations, praise, plans. Messages from a version of the world that no longer existed. She typed and deleted responses she never sent. The silence grew louder. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the studio lights go dark again, heard the careful tone of the executive's voice, felt the ground give way. Sometime past midnight, a sound pulled her awake. A soft creak. Emma sat up, heart racing. The apartment was dark, moonlight slicing thin lines across the floor. She held her breath, listening. Nothing. She told herself it was the building settling. Old pipes. Normal sounds. She lay back down, though her body stayed tense, alert. In the morning, sunlight filled the apartment too easily. Emma woke with a jolt of confusion, then remembered everything at once. Her phone remained silent. She didn't get dressed right away. She wandered the apartment barefoot, coffee growing cold in her mug. The walls felt closer than before. The rooms felt larger and emptier at the same time. She opened her laptop out of habit, then closed it again. No schedule, no script, no audience. She checked the front door. It was unlocked. Emma frowned. She was meticulous about locking doors. Always had been. She stood there for a moment, staring at the handle, a strange chill crawling up her spine. After a second, she laughed quietly at herself. Get it together. She locked it, double-checked, and moved on. But later, as evening fell, she noticed something else. A cabinet in the hallway, one she rarely used, was slightly open. Just an inch. Emma stared at it longer than necessary. Had she opened it? She couldn't remember. That night, as she lay in bed again, the silence pressed in around her. No notifications. No calls. No proof that the world still needed her. For the first time in years, Emma felt truly alone. And beneath that loneliness, something else stirred. A sense, not of danger, but of something waiting. Unseen. Unremembered. As if the fall wasn't over yet. The silence didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in. Emma noticed it first in the mornings. She woke earlier than she needed to, out of habit, and lay there waiting for urgency to claim her. It never did. No buzzing alarm tied to a call time. No rush to beat traffic. No producer's text asking for a rewrite. The hours stretched wide and empty, and she didn't know where to place herself inside them. She got up anyway. Routine had always steadied her. She showered, dressed, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen counter as steam rose from her mug. The city outside moved on without her. Cars passed. Someone laughed on the sidewalk below. Life continued, indifferent to her absence. Her phone sat where she'd left it, screen dark. Emma told herself it was early. People were busy. They would call later. By noon, she had checked it 17 times. She sent a message to her agent, short, professional, safe. Let me know when you have a moment. No reply. She scrolled through her contacts, hovering over names she hadn't dialed in years. Colleagues. Acquaintances. People who knew her as the polished woman on screen, not the quiet one standing barefoot in her kitchen. She put the phone down. The apartment felt different during the day. Without her usual comings and goings, the room seemed to exhale, settling into a stillness she had never allowed before. She moved slowly from room to room, touching things as if seeing them for the first time. The framed photos on the wall were mostly professional, event shots, red carpets, posed smiles. There were few personal memories, fewer still that involved other people. When had that happened? In the afternoon, she cleaned. Not because the apartment needed it, but because movement kept the thoughts at bay. She wiped counters that were already spotless, folded clothes she hadn't worn in weeks, organized drawers she never opened. She found herself standing in the hallway, staring at the cabinet again. It was closed now. Properly. Just like she'd left it. Emma hesitated, then opened it. Inside were old coats, a pair of boots she'd forgotten she owned, a box of scarves she no longer wore. Nothing out of place. Nothing alarming. Still, she felt foolishly disappointed as she shut the door. That night, the quiet grew heavier. She cooked for herself and ate in silence, the sound of her fork against the plate unnervingly loud. Halfway through, she realized she wasn't hungry. She pushed the food away and sat there, hands folded, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Her phone finally buzzed. Her heart jumped, then sank. A notification. An app update. Nothing more. Emma laughed once, sharply, at the ceiling. She went to bed early. Sleep came in fragments, shallow and restless. She dreamed of studio lights flickering on and off, of applause fading mid-clap. She woke with the sense that someone had been standing nearby, watching her. The apartment was empty. The next few days blurred together. Friends didn't call. Not really. A brief text from someone she used to work with. Sorry to hear about the show. Let's catch up sometime. No follow-up. No plan. The words felt polite, distant, already fading. Emma stopped checking the phone as often. Each glance carried the risk of disappointment, and she was learning, quickly, how much that hurt. She began to notice sounds instead. The soft click of the heater turning on at night. Footsteps in the hallway outside her door. A faint thud somewhere above her apartment, always at nearly the same time. None of it was unusual. She knew that. Buildings made noise. Cities breathed. Still, one evening, as she brushed her teeth, she heard something behind her. A whisper of movement. She froze. Toothpaste foam gathering at the corner of her mouth. Eyes locked on her reflection. The bathroom door stood open, the hallway beyond dim. Nothing moved. After a moment, she rinsed her mouth and turned off the light. Her heart took longer to slow. She told herself the truth she'd been avoiding. She didn't know how to be still. Her entire life had been built on momentum. Forward motion. Achievement stacked on achievement. Silence had never been part of the plan. On the fifth day, she didn't leave the apartment at all. She sat on the floor of her living room with her back against the couch, knees drawn up, and let the quiet press in. Without distractions, memories crept closer, moments she had pushed aside for years. A childhood bedroom she could barely picture now. A woman's voice calling her name, warm and distant. A promise she couldn't remember making. Her chest tightened. She stood abruptly, as if the memories might catch her if she stayed too long. That was when she noticed the door. Not the front door. The one at the end of the hallway, tucked between the guest room and the storage closet. She had always thought of it as just another door, one she rarely used, leading to a narrow utility space she'd never bothered to explore. It was open, just slightly. Emma stared at it, her breath shallow. She was certain she hadn't gone down that end of the hallway all day. Certain she would have remembered opening it. She stepped closer. The air near the door felt cooler, heavier, as if the space beyond it held its own atmosphere. She reached out and pushed it open fully. Inside was exactly what she expected, and yet, something felt wrong. A small, dim room. Shelves along the walls. Boxes stacked neatly, untouched by time. Dust lay thick on the floor, undisturbed. Emma frowned. Why had she never gone through this properly? She took one step inside, then stopped. There, on the middle shelf, sat a box she didn't recognize. It was old. Cardboard edges softened with age, sealed with yellowed tape. Her name was written across the top in handwriting that wasn't hers. Emma reached out, fingers hovering just above the lid. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with something closer to anticipation. Behind her, somewhere in the apartment, a floorboard creaked. She turned. Nothing. When she looked back, the box seemed to wait patiently, as if it had always been meant for this moment, for this silence, this pause, this breaking point. Emma lifted it carefully and carried it into the living room. She set it on the coffee table and sat across from it, hands resting on her knees. For the first time since the fall, she felt something other than loss. Curiosity. Purpose. As if the quiet hadn't been empty at all, but clearing space for something she had forgotten to hear. She peeled back the tape. And just like that, the silence broke. The tape came away with a soft, brittle sound, like paper giving up a secret it had held for too long. Emma lifted the lid slowly. At first, she saw only layers. Old newspaper, yellowed and folded carefully, as if someone had tried to protect what lay beneath from time itself. The smell reached her before the meaning did. Dust, age, and something faintly familiar. A scent that tugged at the edges of her memory without forming a picture. She peeled back the paper. Inside were objects arranged with care. Not random. Not forgotten. Preserved. Her breath caught. A small leather-bound notebook lay on top, its edges worn smooth by handling. Beneath it, a stack of photographs tied together with a thin blue ribbon. An envelope rested at the bottom, thick and heavy, its flap sealed but creased as if it had once been opened, then closed again. Emma didn't touch anything for a long moment. Her heartbeat filled the room. She picked up the notebook first. The leather was cracked, darkened with age. When she opened it, the pages whispered softly, the sound sending a shiver through her. The handwriting inside was neat but looping, confident yet warm. It wasn't hers. She read the first line. For Emma. For when she is ready. Her throat tightened. She flipped through a few pages. Dates jumped out at her. Years she barely remembered. Notes written in a voice that felt close, intimate. Observations about ordinary days. Small victories. Gentle worries. Mentions of a girl. Her, learning to read. Asking too many questions. Refusing to sleep unless a story was told. Emma closed the notebook quickly, her chest aching. She reached for the photographs next. The ribbon slipped free easily, as if it had been tied for her hands alone. The photos slid into her lap, and she lifted the first one. A little girl stared back at her. Emma gasped softly. The girl had her eyes. The same wide, searching gaze. The same dimple in her left cheek. She stood in a small backyard, knees scraped, hair pulled into uneven pigtails, smiling without restraint. Emma had no memory of this moment. She flipped to the next photograph. The same girl, older now, sat at a kitchen table, tongue caught between her teeth as she concentrated on something out of frame. A woman stood behind her, hands resting gently on the girl's shoulders. Emma's fingers trembled. She knew that woman. Or rather, she should have. The recognition was visceral, immediate, and devastating. Her mother. The room seemed to tilt. Emma pressed the photograph to her chest, as if it might anchor her. Images flooded her mind in fragments. Laughter in a warm kitchen, the sound of humming while dishes were washed, a voice reading aloud in the evenings. She had buried these memories so deeply beneath ambition and survival that she'd convinced herself they had never existed. Tears blurred her vision. She moved through the photographs one by one, each image peeling back another layer of forgetting. Birthdays, school events, quiet moments that never made headlines and never asked for applause. Moments that mattered. At the bottom of the stack, she found a photo that stopped her completely. It showed her older, late teens, maybe early 20s. She stood beside her mother, arms crossed, expression guarded. The warmth between them was thinner here, stretched tight. Emma remembered this time. The arguments, the impatience, the feeling that home was holding her back. She swallowed hard. The envelope remained. Emma stared at it for several seconds before lifting it. Her name was written across the front again, in the same familiar handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a letter. She unfolded it carefully, afraid the paper might tear under the weight of what it carried. My Emma, if you are reading this, then you've finally stopped long enough to listen. Emma pressed a hand to her mouth. The letter was long. She read slowly, absorbing every word. Her mother wrote about pride, about watching Emma chase the world with fire in her eyes. She wrote about fear, too, about knowing when to step back, about loving someone enough to let them leave, even when it hurt. I never wanted to be a burden, the letter said. I only wanted to be a place you could return to. Emma's tears fell freely now, splashing onto the page. The letter spoke of illness, gently, without bitterness. Of days Emma had been too busy to notice the calls going unanswered. Of love that never wavered, even as time ran out. At the end, her mother wrote, everything you're looking for, you already carry. But some doors only open when the noise stops. Emma folded the letter and held it to her chest, her body shaking with sobs she had postponed for years. The silence of the apartment felt different now. Not empty. Full. She didn't know how long she sat there, surrounded by pieces of a life she had abandoned in her pursuit of another. When she finally stood, her legs felt weak, but her mind was clear in a way it hadn't been since the day her show ended. The fall hadn't taken everything. It had taken the distractions. Emma returned the items to the box carefully, except for the notebook and the letter. Those she kept out, placing them on the nightstand beside her bed. That night, when she lay down, she didn't reach for her phone. She reached for the notebook. As she read, the apartment settled around her. The strange sounds didn't come. The unease didn't return. Instead, a quiet understanding began to form, soft but insistent. This wasn't coincidence. The box hadn't appeared by accident. Someone, had been waiting for her to stop running. As she drifted into sleep, one thought echoed clearly in her mind. There was more to uncover. And whatever waited next was closer than she thought. The notebook became Emma's morning ritual. She woke with the light, not because she had somewhere to be, but because she wanted to read more. She sat at the edge of her bed, legs tucked beneath her, the letter and notebook resting on her lap like something sacred. The handwriting felt alive, steady, patient, intimate. Each page carried not just words, but presence. Her mother had written about ordinary things. Groceries, neighbors, weather. But threaded through the mundane were gentle messages meant for a daughter who had stopped listening. Success is loud, one passage read. Love is quieter. That's why it's easy to miss. Emma closed the notebook and stared at the wall, breath slow, thoughts racing. How many quiet moments had she sacrificed for noise? How many calls unanswered? How many weekends postponed? The apartment felt less hollow now. Still quiet, but intentional. As if the space itself was giving her room to hear. Later that day, she noticed something new. Tucked into the back cover of the notebook was an envelope she hadn't seen before. Smaller than the first. Thinner. Unlabeled. Her pulse quickened. Inside was a folded page, edges worn smooth, and a key taped to the bottom corner. Emma's fingers hovered over it. The page held only a few lines, written more carefully than the others. Not all rooms are meant to be entered in a hurry. The door opens when you're ready. Trust what remains when everything else falls away. Emma stared at the key. It was old. Brass, slightly tarnished, heavy for its size. Not decorative. Practical. Her mind jumped immediately to the apartment. To the small room at the end of the hallway. To the shelves of forgotten boxes. To the sense she'd had, that something in her home was waiting. She stood slowly, key clutched in her palm. The hallway looked unchanged. The same muted light. The same quiet. But as she approached the utility door, she noticed something she hadn't before. A second door. It was narrow, almost flush with the wall beside the shelving unit, painted the same off-white as the rest of the apartment. No handle. No visible lock. Just a faint outline, as if it had been designed to disappear. Emma's breath caught. She pressed her fingers against the surface. Solid. Real. At the base of the door, nearly invisible unless you knew to look, was a small keyhole. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with certainty. This was it. She didn't open it. Not yet. Emma stepped back, grounding herself. She remembered the note. Not all rooms are meant to be entered in a hurry. That evening, she left the apartment for the first time in days. She walked without direction, letting the city surround her. She passed cafes she'd never had time to sit in, parks she'd only seen from a car window. People moved past her, unaware of the shift happening quietly inside her chest. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about what she'd lost. She was thinking about what she had ignored. When she returned home, she cooked a proper meal and ate slowly. She called a number she hadn't dialed in years, an aunt she'd drifted from. The conversation was awkward at first, then warm, then emotional. When they hung up, Emma felt lighter. The key remained on the table, waiting. That night, she dreamed differently. She stood in a hallway filled with doors, some open, some sealed, some barely visible. Her mother stood at the far end, smiling gently, not beckoning, not rushing her, just present. When Emma woke, she knew. She dressed simply and moved to the hallway. The apartment felt still, expectant. She knelt before the hidden door and slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. She hesitated only a second before turning it. The click echoed softly. Emma rested her hand against the door, closed her eyes, and inhaled. Whatever was on the other side wasn't there to hurt her. It was there to remind her. She opened the door. The door opened without resistance. No creak. No dramatic rush of air. Just a quiet surrender, as if it had been waiting patiently for years, longer than Emma could measure. Light spilled from within, not bright, but warm. Soft. Familiar in a way that made her chest ache before she even stepped inside. The room was small, but deliberate. Emma stood frozen at the threshold, hands still resting on the doorframe, afraid that if she blinked too hard, the space might vanish. The walls were covered in photographs, dozens of them, arranged not for symmetry, but for meaning. Moments captured without polish or performance. Her life, not the one the world knew. The real one. She stepped in slowly. The first wall held images from her childhood. Birthdays with crooked candles. School plays where she stood stiffly on stage, eyes searching the crowd. A photograph of her asleep on a couch, her head resting in her mother's lap, mouth slightly open in complete trust. Emma swallowed hard. Beneath the photos were shelves. On them sat small objects. A chipped mug she remembered from home, a pressed flower in a frame, a ribbon from a competition she'd forgotten she'd lost, and cried over. This room wasn't a shrine. It was a record. The second wall told a harder story. Teenage years. Packed bags. Forced smiles. A letter pinned to the wall, unopened, with her name written across it in familiar handwriting. Emma didn't need to read it to know what it said. Come home. She moved to the center of the room. A desk sat there, simple and wooden. On it rested a single journal, different from the notebook she'd already read. Newer. Its cover was worn, but not with age. With use. Emma opened it. The first entry was dated months before her show had been canceled. I don't know how to tell her, the handwriting read. So I'll leave pieces behind. If she ever stops running, she'll find them. Emma's breath hitched. Her mother had known. Known Emma would need to lose something loud to hear something true. She read on. The journal spoke of forgiveness, not asked for, not demanded, simply offered. Of pride that had never wavered. Of love that didn't need permission. At the final page, Emma found a photograph tucked neatly into the fold. It was recent. Too recent. Her heart skipped. The photo showed Emma standing outside her apartment building. Tired. Rushing. Phone pressed to her ear. She didn't remember this moment at all. On the back, written in careful script, were the words, I never left you. Emma sank into the chair, the room blurring as tears finally came. Not sharp and breaking, but heavy and cleansing. This was the this. Not horror. Not punishment. Revelation. The room wasn't about what she'd lost. It was about what had stayed. Her mother's presence lived here, in the quiet, in the intention, in the spaces Emma had avoided. Not as a ghost, but as memory shaped into meaning. Emma closed the journal and sat there for a long time. When she finally stood, she felt different. Lighter. Rooted. She turned once more, taking in the room, not as something secret, but as something complete. Then she closed the door, not because she was done, but because she knew where it was now. Emma did not rush out of the room. She stood in the hallway with the door closed behind her, one hand resting lightly against the wall, as if steadying herself after a long journey. The apartment felt changed, not rearranged, not altered in any physical way, but transformed by understanding. The silence that once pressed against her now felt like space. Breathing room. She exhaled slowly. For the first time since the cancellation, her chest didn't tighten at the thought of tomorrow. She walked to the window and opened it, letting fresh air spill into the room. The city greeted her as it always had. Honking cars, distant voices, movement layered over movement, but it no longer felt like something she had to chase. She was part of it, whether she ran or stood still. Emma returned to the bedroom and sat on the edge of her bed. The notebook and letter still rested on the nightstand. She picked up the notebook one last time and flipped to the blank pages at the back. She had never kept a journal before. There had never been time. She picked up a pen. At first, the words came slowly. Today, I stopped running. She paused, surprised by how much relief that sentence carried. She wrote about the fall, about the terror of losing the identity she had wrapped herself in so tightly. She wrote about the silence, how it had nearly swallowed her whole. And then she wrote about the door, about the room, about love that had waited patiently for her to return. The pen moved more easily now. When she finished, she closed the notebook gently and set it beside the letter, no longer